Piali no Wampoyowan, Kenihki Nistoke, Namanti Pewase, Ika Totlamachtilis, Timomachtice, Tlenihke, Kenihki Moilia, ni tlahtoa, ni Quihtoa Setlamantli, so ni te Illia Setlamantli, Nohkia, Titlatose, Tlenica, Sampampa, Wan Noso or Soanoso. Hi everyone, today we're going to learn about different words in Nahuatl, such as how to say things, how to tell someone something, how to say I say something, and we'll also be covering 3 words, the word for but, for about, and for or. All right, so let me share my screen and let me know if you see any technical difficulties like the slide not changing or anything like that. Okay. So we're going to learn words that are related to speaking. And you'll see it's a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try to keep it not too complicated because there are a lot of variety differences in Nahuatl in terms of saying how to say to speak. But I'm going to give you the 2 most common ones, at least for Huasteca Nahuatl. Okay, so we're going to learn to speak, to say something, to tell someone, and the words about, or, and but. Okay, so last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't remember. Last week we learned the word tlahtoli, right? This word tlahtoli, it has many meanings, and it can mean speech, it can mean word, language, phrase, conversation, anything related to speaking, really. So one new word that you're gonna learn this week is the word to say to speak. So Carmen tlahtoa. Carmen, I'm naming these people. These are not the real names. I get them from like a free stock photo app where I can't get copyright sued for them. Anyways, Carmen tlahtoa. Carmen tlahtoa. Notice I'm using the verb tlahtoa and she's saying tlamantli. She's just saying things. ¿Cuál? Then in Nahuatl, in Huasteca Nahuatl, there is another word that is not tlahtoli. They also do use the word tlahtoli, but they also have the word sanili. Okay, this word sanili also means, it can mean word, it can mean speech, it can mean language, it can mean phrase, it can mean conversation. When I looked this word up in the dictionary and our personal lexicon dictionary, it says a spoken word. But when I went and did a search through all the uses of the word sanili, it pretty much gets translated as word, speech, language, etc. So I think it's very similar, pretty much almost the same thing as the word tlahtoli. And just like the word tlahtoli, which means word or etc., and it has the equivalent tlahtoa, sanili has its equivalent verb, which means the same thing as tlahtoa, which is saniloa. So instead of saying Carmen tlahtoa, you could also say Carmen saniloa. Carmen saniloa. ¿Cuál? So we have either tlahtoa or saniloa. So in Nahuatl, the most common word for to speak is tlahtoa. So every variety of Nahuatl that I've run into pretty much understands the word tlahtoa to mean to speak in general. But the Huasteca word, Huasteca variety that we speak, and more other Huasteca varieties also use this word saniloa. So you might come in contact with the word tlahtoa or saniloa. They both mean to speak in general. If you go and search other varieties of Nahuatl, you're gonna find out that there are way more ways than I'm telling you here to say to speak, but these are the most common ones. You might hear other varieties say ni tlahpoa Nahuatl, which is like saying I count Nahuatl, ni tlahpoa Nahuatl, or I recount Nahuatl. Or you might hear them say ni hueli Nahuatl, I quote unquote can Nahuatl. So the way that I'm teaching you, this is the most common way in the Huasteca, but know that there are plenty more other words that exist out there. I believe Kamati is another one. And anyways, but the 2 most common ones are tlahtoa or saniloa. All right, so Nayeli, I'm naming her Nayeli. Nayeli Nahuatlahtoa. Nayeli Nahuatlahtoa. ¿Cuál? Claudia, Castilla tlahtoa. Okay, so last week I told you that the name for the language is Spanish is Castilian. Well, it is true, but I found out that more commonly in Huasteca, they actually say Castilla. Now, I can understand both Castilla or Castilian, but Castilla is more common in the Huasteca region. Castilian is more common in like Guerrero or central varieties. But either way, I understand both. You could say Castilian tlahtoa, or you could say Castilla tlahtoa. Castilla tlahtoa is probably more common in the Huasteca region. The name for the language, the Spanish language, I didn't mention last week. You can also just say Castilla, and that is understood as the language of Spanish in Huasteca Nahuatl. Okay, so to review, we have the word tlahtoli, which can mean any of these things. And we have the equivalent verb tlahtoa, or related verb tlahtoa. We have the word sanili, which is pretty much the same thing as tlahtoli. And we have the similar verb saniloa. Quali. Nayeli nahuatlahtoa. So notice she's saying nimitztlazotla. So Nayeli loves you. And Claudia Castilla tlahtoa. And Claudia saying she loves you too. All right. So in Nahuatl, really when you're saying the verb tlahtoa, which means to speak, you're actually using the verb ihtoa. The verb is actually ihtoa. And so when you're saying to speak in Nahuatl, you're actually saying to say things. Because if you remember from previous classes, this tla means to do an action to some objects. And in this meaning, it's just thing or things. And ihtoa, this verb ihtoa, it comes from the word, that verb means to say something, to say a thing specifically. So when you're saying ni tlahtoa, you're actually literally saying, I say things. So that's how they say to speak. Saniloa doesn't have anything equivalent, but just know that that's essentially what you're saying when you say ni tlahtoa. All right, the reason I bring this up, or actually I'm about to show you two verbs that are related. First one you already know, which is the verb ihtoa, to say things. But now I'm going to show you a different verb, which is Illia. Okay? Ooh, I should have put a little space in front of it, but whatever. Okay. Nayeli ihtoa itoka. Nayeli ihtoa itoka. Nayeli says her name, right? So you see Nayeli and she's saying Nayeli. So she says it. The it that she's saying is this ki, and what she says is itoka. So itoka is her name. Quali? Nayeli ihtoa tlazokamati. Nayeli ihtoa tlazokamati. And Nayeli ihtoa tiyeyexin. Nayeli ihtoa tiyeyexin. Okay, quali? All right. So remember those three phrases, and now compare it to these phrases. Nayeli Illia Claudia itoka. Nayeli Illia Claudia itoka. So she says, Claudia, no toca Nayeli. All right. Nayeli Illia Claudia tlazokamati. So Nayeli is like, Claudia, tlazokamati. So Nayeli Illia Claudia tlazokamati. And lastly, Nayeli Illia Claudia tiyeyexin. Claudia tiyeyexin. Okay. And Claudia Illia Nayeli tiyeyexin. Nayeli tiyeyexin. Okay. Last example is Moilia tiyeyexin. They tell each other tiyeyexin. Okay. The reason I gave you these two examples is because I commonly see students mess this up and mix Ihtoa and Illia with each other. When I started as a student, I actually didn't know the difference, and I didn't know that Nahuatl used two different verbs to say for the word to say. So in Nahuatl, there's a difference between saying something in general and saying something to a person, a specific person. And you'll actually notice in future classes that Nahuatl makes a distinction between like doing an action to like an object and doing an action to a person. So we haven't yet covered applicative verbs, but you'll see that some verbs are the same when you're doing the action to a person or to not a person, and then sometimes they're different when you're doing the action to a person. And see here, when you say something in general, like I say a thing, or I say a word, I say a phrase, I say something, I say a name, I say a specific thing, then I'm gonna use the verb ihtoa. But if I say something to someone, or AKA tell someone something, you're telling a person something, you are not gonna use the verb ihtoa, you're gonna use the verb Illia. Okay, and try to make it very clear, because trust me, I used to make this mistake, and you probably will too, and I'm trying to prevent it. But if not, I mean, refer back to the slide later. Okay, so this is like a summary slide essentially to tell you the differences. So tlahtoa and saniloa are basically synonyms. You could say ni tlahtoa or ni saniloa, and they both mean to speak. Literally, tlahtoa is to say things. This saniloa is probably coming from the word sanili, which remember means a word or speech, and then it became a verb. Saniloa means like to carry out a word or something like that. But this verb to speak really is coming from the verb ihtoa, which is a transitive verb that always requires an object, and it means to say something. In other words, you cannot use this with a person, even though in classical you could. And then, but not in Huasteca or modern Nahuatl. And then Illia is to tell a person something. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and I'm going to ask you, Tlenkichiwa Nayeli. What is Nayeli doing? And hopefully the pictures make it obvious, but if not, I won't blame you, because it's kind of hard to express what she's doing with pictures. But anyways, Tlenkichiwa Nayeli. Okay, Tlenkichiwa Nayeli.
Nayeli Sanilokit.
Oh, Sanilosket means speaker. So Nayeli Sanilosket means Nayeli is a speaker.
Nayeli Saniloa.
Kena. Nayeli Saniloa or Nayeli tlahtoa. Either one is fine. Nayeli tlahtoa or Nayeli Saniloa. Wali. Okay. This one you may not be able to guess, but Tlenkichiwa Nayeli. Tlenkichiwa Nayeli. This one is kind of hard for you to just guess, but take your best guess.
How about Nayeli Illia? Or would it be La Illia?
Okay, so remember that Illia is only for people. Is she talking to a person?
I thought she was saying thank you to somebody. Maybe not.
No, Illia is to say something, just to tell, sorry, Illia is to tell someone something. Since she is not talking to a specific person, she's not telling anyone anything, so you could not use the verb Illia. Tlazokamati is thank you. So here, I know this one's a little hard to explain, to say, but I was trying to have you say that Nayeli Nahuatl tlahtoa. Nayeli is speaking Nahuatl in this picture. Nayeli Nahuatl tlahtoa. But I get it. This isn't super clear, so that's fine. Okay. Or you could also say Nayeli Nawa Saniloa. I have not seen Nawa Saniloa very commonly, but in theory it works. Like you could say ni Nawa Saniloket. I'm a Nahuatl speaker. So I haven't seen Nawa Saniloa by itself, but I've seen Saniloket, Nawa Saniloket. And Nahuatl is flexible enough that they would understand ni Nawa Saniloa. But more common, you'll hear people say ni Nahuatl tlahtoa. I speak Nahuatl. Wally?
Is it correct to say Nayeli tlahtoa nawat? Is that interchangeable?
Kena? Nayeli tlahtoa Nahuatl. You can say that too.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
And later on, you're going to see that there's another way to say it that way. But yes, you can split up as Nayeli tlahtoa Nahuatl or Nayeli saniloa Nahuatl. But it's more common to say Ika Nahuatl or Ika. Nayeli tlahtoa Ika Nahuatl or Nayeli saniloa Ika Nahuatl. And we're actually going to talk about Ika. Okay. So Tlenki Chiwa Nayeli. You know, I should have put them side by side and then it would have been clear what I was trying to ask. F. Sorry, sometimes I think of better ways to teach something. But anyways, Tlenki Chiwa Nayeli.
Nayeli tlahtoa.
Okay. So if you're just trying to say Nayeli speaks, okay, Kena, that's an answer. In this case, I was trying to specifically show that she's speaking Spanish because in this previous one, she's speaking Nahuatl, and in this one, she's speaking Spanish. And maybe I should have said El Español es bello, but I wanted to keep it like consistent. Anyways, Nayeli Castilla tlahtoa. Now, you actually said the word tlahtoa, and it turns out that tlahtoa is actually a way to say to speak Spanish. That is one of the definitions of the verb tlahtoa, but it's a little bit complicated, so I didn't want to like throw it in there. But essentially, you could say Castilla tlahtoa, and you could actually say tlahtoa. Now, I personally don't agree with the definition of tlahtoa as meaning to speak Spanish because it has this like arrogance to it, saying like, oh, if you speak Nahuatl, you don't actually speak, but whereas if you speak Spanish, you actually speak. And I think that that's ridiculous. And because of that, I don't agree with that definition, but it is one of the definitions that is found in the dictionary, which is tlahtoa means to speak Spanish specifically. But as far as I know, in classical, tlahtoa just means to say things in general or to speak. And so I take it as just to speak. But you might find some speakers who, when they say tlahtoa, actually mean to speak Spanish specifically. All right. Tlenkichiwa Nayeli. Yeah, this one may not be clear either. This one, I'm going to just give it to you because I want to, okay. In this case, I'm trying to say that she is saying piali. So I'm saying Nayeli Ihtoa piali. So the thing that she's saying, the word she's saying is piali. So I'm saying Nayeli says piali. If you remember from the past, piali means like hi, or it also means bye in Nahuatl, in Huasteca Nahuatl specifically. Other varieties of Nahuatl, they don't necessarily use piali, but they probably do understand it because it's fairly common. Okay, and in this case, Nayeli ki Illia Claudia piali. Okay, Nayeli ki Illia Claudia piali. So if you remember the previous person who tried to use the verb te Illia, what I was trying to tell you is that Ihtoa is to just say a word like piali versus ki Illia. Here you're saying Nayeli ki Illia Claudia. So now this ki is referring to Claudia, saying Nayeli tells Claudia hi. Okay, so actually I made a slide to specifically illustrate this difference. So Nayeli ki Ihtoa piali versus Nayeli ki Illia Claudia piali. So in this case, I'm saying Nayeli says it, and the thing that she's saying is piali. She says piali. Versus when you say Nayeli Illia Claudia piali, this ki is now not referring to the word piali. It is now referring to the word Claudia. So here it's saying Nayeli says it, piali, versus here it says Nayeli tells her, Claudia, piali. So this ki in both of these situations is referring to a different thing. And remember, the verb ihtoa can only be, you're only saying this person says a thing versus the verb Illia is this person tells someone, a person, something, and that's why you see the word here, Claudia. And you're probably thinking like, yeah, obviously I can tell that she's telling Claudia something because I see the name Claudia in there. And so obviously it shouldn't be that confusing, but it can be confusing in the sense of this without the word Claudia, this sentence, Nayeli ki Illia piali, is still a valid sentence. Nayeli ki Illia piali, it means something, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. This does not mean Nayeli says piali, okay? If you say Nayeli ki Ihtoa piali, you're saying Nayeli, Nayeli says piali. But if you say Nayeli ki Illia piali, you're saying Nayeli tells her or him. In this case, we actually don't know if it's a her or a him, piali. So this is like in Spanish equivalent saying Nayeli dice hola versus Nayeli le dice hola. This le part is the ski that is in the verb piali. I'm sorry, in the verb Illia. So Nayeli ki Illia piali is like saying Nayeli le dice a alguien, we don't know who, piali. So in Nahuatl, these two phrases, they look very similar, but they're not the same thing. And I constantly see people mess this up, which is why I bring it to your attention. Okay, so Nayeli says piali is the first translation, and Nayeli tells her piali in the second one. And actually here we don't know if it's a him or a her, but because of the previous story, we know that it was talking about her because we're talking about Claudia. But if you said Nayeli ki Illia piali, it could also translate as Nayeli tells him piali. But you would know based on the context who the k is referring to. Okay. All right. So I hope that that's clear, and I will have exercises, I believe so, where you could actually put this into practice, at least during the lecture. But for sure, I already had some previous homework, and trust me, I put a lot of questions on this because I will see you mess it up, and I don't want you to mess it up. Okay, so in Nahuatl, you might be wondering like, wait, how do I say I talk about or I talk with a person? And actually, the with a person part, we're probably not going to cover. We're not going to cover in this lecture because it's also a little bit more complicated. But Nahuatl does have a way to say I talk about this, I talk about that, and that word in Nahuatl, or at least in Huasteca Nahuatl, is tica. Okay, this word tica, it has multiple definitions, and here I only put 3 of them, but there's actually more definitions, but these are the 3 most common definitions. When you see the word tica, it can mean with. Now this does not mean with like in like with a person. It means like with when you're using something as an object, as an instrument. Like I use this spoon, and with this spoon I feed myself. That kind of a with, when you use an object as an instrument. And there's, if you want to say to talk about something or to talk regarding something, in Nahuatl you can just say ika, or you can say tlenica. Tlenica is like about or regarding, okay? And you'll see also in this class that ika can also mean during, like during a specific period of time. Okay, so if you want, like I think Edgar had asked, can you say ni tlahtoa Nahuatl? Yes, you could say ni tlahtoa Nahuatl. But another way to say it would be ni tlahtoa ika Nahuatl. And in Nahuatl, usually in English we'll translate this as I speak in Nahuatl, but that definition of ika is not really in. It just means using something. So ni tlahtoa ika Nahuatl, you're saying I speak Nahuatl. That's how it translates in English, but I put in parentheses, I speak, quote, parentheses, using Nahuatl, because that's really what Nahuatl is actually expressing with the word ika. You could also say ni tlahtoa ika Castilla, I speak Spanish, but the implication with the ika is that you're using Spanish to do that, to do the speaking. I say this because in previous classes when I've taught students, they think that ika means in, like I speak in Nahuatl, because I always say ni tlahtoa ika Nahuatl, but the ika does not mean in, it means using. I speak using Nahuatl, etc. Another, those are just like how you say like to speak, or I speak Nahuatl, whatever. If you're ever wondering how to say that, you could also say ni Nahuatl tlahtoa or ni tlahtoa, as you previously saw. But this ika also has that other instrumental meaning, or it has an instrumental meaning you're using something as an object, as an instrument. So you could also say ni tlahquiloa, I write, ika tlicoli, with a pencil. Ni tlahquiloa ika tlicoli, I write with a pencil. So I wrote it as I write with a pencil because that's how we would translate it, but it's really implying I write using a pencil. Ni tlahquiloa ika noma, I write with my hand. Ni tlahquiloa ika noma, okay? And another meaning of ika is to say I speak about, or no, sorry, about or regarding. So I should have given you another example, but this one, these are still good. Like if you want to say I speak about my life, I haven't taught you the word for life yet in Nahuatl. In Nahuatl, the word is nemilistli, means life. And when you say nisaniloa ika no nemilis, you're saying I talk about, or I speak about my life. Nisaniloa ika no nemilis. Okay? And you could also say, I write about my life. So you would say, ni tlahquiloa ika. Oh, sorry. Here I wrote people's lives. So ni tlahquiloa ika tenemilis. Here, remember that the te means regarding people. So if you want to say, I write about people's lives, ni tlahquiloa ika tenemilis. I write regarding or about people's lives. And remember, nemilistli is an inanimate. So life or lives in plural is the same in Nahuatl. So if you want to say people's lives, it's still tenemilis, even though it sounds like it could also translate as someone's life or a person's life, etc. In Nahuatl, this is vague. Tenemilis can mean both of them. It can mean one person's life or someone's life, or it can mean people's lives in plural. So ni tlahquiloa ika tenemilis, I write about people's lives. Quali. And last meaning that I'm going to present is the meaning of during. So I want to say during the day, during the day is a little specific, but it has one special word for during the day, but almost every other time is ika. You're going to use ika. So nisaniloa ika tiotlak. I speak during the afternoon. Nisaniloa ika tiotlak. Ni tlahquiloa ika tlahcoyowal. I write during midnight. This tlahcoyowal, it means half. Tlahco is half, and yowali is night, or tlayowali is also night. So ni tlahquiloa ika tlahcoyowal is saying like I write during half of the night, or like it's understood as midnight, but it's literally half of the night is how they say midnight in Nahuatl. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you again, Tlenkichiwa Nayeli. I think I'm going to ask you that. Oh, I'm not going to ask you that again. What I'm going to ask you is Kenihki Moilia. So you can tell I clearly copied it wrong. Kenihki Moilia. I duplicated it wrong. Okay, well, anyways, let's go back to presenting. So let's go back. All right. Okay, Kenihki Moilia ika Nahuatl. I speak Nahuatl. And here, there's actually two ways to say I speak Nahuatl. Actually, there's more than one, but see which ones you can come up with.
Moilia ni saniloa Nahuatl.
Okay, that's one way. Ni saniloa Nahuatl.
Ni tlahtoa Nahuatl.
Ni tlahtoa Nahuatl is valid. Quali. So I can think of three more ways to say it. Yeah. There's multiple ways
Moilia
that way. Huh?
Moilia ni tlahtoa Nahuatl.
Okay, but that, yeah. I think Edgar already said that one.
Ni tlahtoa ika Nahuatl.
Ah, Kena, you could say ni tlahtoa ika Nahuatl. You could say ni tlahtoa ni saniloa ika Nahuatl. And the one that I like the most is ni Nahuatl tlahtoa, which is one word. Ni Nahuatl tlahtoa, and you see that I also put saniloa. So you could say ni Nahuatl saniloa, ni Nahuatl tlahtoa, ni tlahtoa ika Nahuatl, ni tlahtoa nahuatl, ni saniloa ika nahuatl, ni saniloa nahuatl. There are so many ways. And this is only the three, like two, right? And I gave you like 5 possibilities, but there's also another verb. There's the verb nahuati. Ni nahuati also means I speak nahuatl. So actually there's multiple ways. And other varieties might say, ni hueli nahuatl, ni tlapoa nahuatl. Those are the ones I can think of. Oh, Nahuatl Pipil says ni taquetza Nahuatl. That's how they say it in Nahuatl Pipil, ni taquetza. So there are so many ways to say, to speak. So when you speak to a native speaker, they might say something slightly different. You'll be like, what? But if you use tlahtoa, they will understand tlahtoa. Maybe not Nahuatl Pipil, but the other ones will. Okay, you speak English. Ooh. Well, you have one of the answers there, but I meant to hide this answer. But Keniki Moilia, there's more. Keniki Moilia, you speak English.
Moelia tisaniloa ika Ingles.
That's one way. Or here ti tlahtoa ika Ingles. Any other ways?
Inglés.
Okay, yeah, ni tlahtoa Ingles, ni saniloa Ingles. You could also put that Ingles into a whole verb in tlahtoa, and you could say ti Ingles tlahtoa. So remember from last week, you can incorporate nouns into verbs if those verbs are transitive verbs. So ti Ingles tlahtoa. That's the shorter way, or ti Ingles saniloa, etc. There's so many ways. Okay, but now what if you want to say I talk about you? I talk about you. Or I speak about you.
Moelia nimit saniloa.
Amo. No. That verb saniloa is not a transitive verb. Saniloa is just to speak in general. But remember, when you speak to a person or about a person, well, you still can use saniloa, but you cannot put the meats in there, because then you're saying I speak you. Ni mit saniloa is like saying I speak you, not I speak about you.
Ni titlasloa.
Sampa again?
Ni titlasloa.
Okay. Okay, ti is not an object, so you cannot say, if I do an action to you, I will not say ni ti tlahtoa. You will say ni meets. Meets is the object form of you.
Got it.
When you use the prefix ti is the one doing the action. But when ti or ta are receiving the action, it turns into meets. So it would be ni meets if you were doing it that way. However, that's still not the correct way to do it. So if you remember in our maybe 5 slides ago, I was talking about the connecting word ika. And that word ika needs to be in here because we're saying I talk about you. So when I talk about you, I have to use ika. So now how do you think you would say this phrase? I talk about you.
How about ni tlahtoa ika ta?
Yes, Kwali, you got it. Ni tlahtoa ika ta. So this is I speak or I talk, ni tlahtoa, about ika, and then ta, you. You as the pronoun. So ni tlahtoa ika ta. So notice when you are by yourself, you're talking about you, that's when you use ta by itself. Whereas when you are doing an action, that's when you use ti. So ni tlahtoa, see here, I am doing the action, so I use ni. But if I was talking about me, I would say na. Okay, so ni tlahtoa ikata, Kwali. We speak about you. We, tohuantin, we speak about you.
Titlatoa ika ta.
Kwali. Titlahtoa ikata. Oh, titlahtoa ikata. Kwali. All right. They speak about us.
Moilia tlahtoa ika tohuantin.
What did you say at the beginning?
Moilia.
Oh, moilia. Moilia means like they speak. It can mean two things. Moilia can mean it is spoken, or it can mean they speak to each other. But here, they speak to each other is not what we're trying to say. Or moilia can also mean he thinks. Depends if you put the H or not. So when they are speaking, they're just speaking in general. They're not doing it to themselves or to each other. So you would not use mo.
Sobi tlahtoi ika tohuantin.
Kena. Tlahtoa ika tohuantin. Tlahtoa. So the only thing is we're adding the H because we're saying they speak. So this part, tlahtoa, is the they speak part. And the about, ika, and us, tohuantin. Okay? Tlahtoa ika tohuantin. I learn with a book. I learn with a book. So let's start with I learned. Just the I learned part.
Ni momashtia ika amosli.
Kena, Ni momachtia, I learned. Ika with a book, amoshli. Okay? So the thing that you're learning with, the thing that you're using is the book. Okay? I help him with money. So you might have to remember how to say help and to help a person.
Niki palewia ika tomi.
Kena. But it would not be Niki palewia, it would be Nik palewia.
Oh, Nik. Okay, got it. Because of the P.
Nik palewia ikatomin. So here you're saying you're helping somebody and the thing that you're using to help them is money. Okay. I help him at night.
Nik palewia tonali.
Tonali is
Oh,
day.
yowali. Sorry, yowali.
Then when you say that Nik palewia yowali, you're saying I help him night, but you're forgetting to say at night.
Ika.
Ika. Nik palewia ika tlayowal, or there's also other varieties say tlayowa, or yowali is the classical way. They'll understand whichever one you use. You could say Nik palewia ika tlayowali, ika tlayowal, ika yowali, etc., etc. What I wanted to say is this ika is like during the night. So even though in English we translate it as at night, but you really, if you think about it, you're saying during the night. So now I would just say nik palewia ika tlayowal, during the night. I wanted to say that to say during the day, the word for day is tonati or tonali in other varieties. In a variety, tonali could also mean day, depending on the context. But anyways, so you would not say ikatonati or ikatonali because there's a specific word in Nahuatl to say during the day, and that would be tonayan, Tonayan. That means by itself, without the ika, means during the day. So you could, if you wanted to say I help him during the day, or during the day, it would be nikpalewia tonayan. The ika, you could put it there if you wanted to, but you don't have to. So you say nikpalewia ika tonayan or nikpalewia tonayan. I help him during the day. But just during the day is the only one that's very specific, has that word tonayan. All the other ones, tlayowali, yowatzinco, tlahcotonal, tlahcoyowal, yowali. That even during times like actual, like 8 o'clock, etc., you can use Ika. I didn't have it 8 o'clock. I should have. You know what? I should have done like a time one, like at 8 o'clock, etc. Okay. I teach in the afternoon. So now I have to think of how do you say I teach. No ideas? So momachtia is to learn. It's very related to momachtia, but it is not momachtia to learn. It's another verb.
Nimachtia?
Huh?
Is it nimachtia?
Machtia is a transitive verb. It requires an object. So when you say ni machtia, you're missing the object.
How about ni te machtia?
Kena, ni te machtia. So in Nahuatl, remember machtia it requires you to say who you're teaching or what you're teaching. So you could also say ni tlamachtia or ni te machtia. So even though in English, we just think of as I teach, as in general, I teach, Nahuatl, the verb machtia, which means teaching, it requires you to say who you're teaching, even though it doesn't translate into English. So you have to think, okay, if I'm teaching, well, I'm teaching people. I don't know who I'm teaching, but I'm teaching people. You could have also said tlamachtia, but then that means I'm teaching things, or I'm teaching I'm teaching things. So ni temachtia is I teach people. So when you teach, generally you're going to be teaching people, probably not animals, right? Maybe you are, and if you are, you say ni tlamachtia. Okay. So ni temachtia, I teach, and then ika, during. So here we have in the afternoon, but here we understand like this is happening during the afternoon. Ika, tiotlak. Tiotlak is afternoon. Okay. So Nahuatl does have words for or, and, but, etc., etc. But they've changed throughout time. So in classical time, the word for or is anozo. It's like the long form of this word. But what has happened, and all these other, so this is the classical way to say or, anozo. But what has happened is with time, it's gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. So these three forms on the bottom, these are all acceptable in the Huasteca region. So you could say noso, or so, or o. And since o happens to also be the way that you say it in Spanish, I think that through the influence of Spanish, a lot of people say oh, but the original Nahuatl word was anoso, and then it got shortened to noso and so and o. So you'll see all three of these forms. I use all three of these forms: noso, so, or o. But the original classical or older word is anoso. All right. So examples with this word: nitlahquiloa, I write; noso, nitlapoa, or I read. Nitlahquiloa, noso, nitlapoa. Okay, you can input any of those three possibilities. I don't know if you could put anoso. I don't know if other varieties say anoso, but I know they'll understand noso or so or o. Okay, and you could say tinehnemi, we walk; so timotlahloa, or we run. Okay. Okay, so now the word for but. Nahuatl originally didn't didn't have a very clear word for but, like pero. But in classical times, if you go and look this up, you'll find that the word au, A-U-H, was a word that used to introduce phrases, and that sometimes, depending on the previous phrase and depending on the phrase that followed it, au would have the meaning of but. But au doesn't necessarily mean the word but. It kind of means like introduction of a phrase, because in some cases, the word au can also mean and. So, but the closest to it would have been, or one of the possibilities would have been the word out. Okay, I'm just giving the classical words. I also found out that in classical times, they had the word yese. And yese is still currently used in other varieties of Nahuatl. Like I've seen it in central varieties. they say yese. And yese in classical times meant nevertheless, but it also meant but. So nevertheless was kind of a stronger version of but. Yese. And so yese is also still used in some varieties. But our variety of Nahuatl, the Huasteca variety, we use the word Zampampa, at least in the Huasteca version in Chicontepec, Veracruz. But I don't know if other varieties that are also Huasteca, if they also use Zampampa. But in Chicontepec, Veracruz, Zampampa does mean but. Pero. A lot of the varieties currently borrow the Spanish word pero, and they'll just say the phrase in Spanish, in Nahuatl, and they'll just say the word pero. So these are all the possibilities, and I'll tell you that the most common ones in the Huasteca variety are going to be Zampampa and pero. I'm in preference of Zampampa, but then sometimes I'm like, wait, but not all the other varieties don't necessarily understand Zampampa, so you have to be cautious with Zampampa. And then pero, because it's borrowed from Spanish, pretty much all of them understand pero. And yese, some varieties use yese. So I kind of like yese the most. It's short, it's two syllables, just like pero. And so I prefer the word yese, but in Huasteca Nahuatl, they may not understand the word yese. Okay, so examples of the word for but. I'm going to use the Chicontepec variety version of it, the word for but. But of course, any of those other possibilities are possible, except maybe ow. Ow is probably not used anymore. I've never heard somebody modern say ow. But that's the classical way. Ni nehnemi sampampa ni siahtok. I walk, but I am tired. Ni nehnemi, I walk. Sampampa ni siahtok. Now, I haven't taught you this word siahtok, but it means to be tired. Siahtok, to be tired. So ni siahtok, I am tired. Okay? Titlapoa, you read. Sampampa ashtitlahquiloa. You read, but you don't write. Titlapoa, sampampa ashtitlahquiloa. ¿Cuál? All right, so now I'm going to ask you, kenihki moilia. How do you say? And now I kind of ran out of easy questions, so these are kind of hard. So I hope that you're able to handle them, but if you're not, well, I'll help you, okay? Some of them are easy, some of them may not be easy, or maybe they're easy because I did a good job. Okay, do you speak Nahuatl or Spanish? Kenihki moilia y Nahuatl. Do you speak Nahuatl or Spanish?
Di saninoa Nahuatl, so Castilla,
Castilla?
Castilla Tlahtoli.
You could call it Castilla Tlahtoli, or you could just call it Castilla. Cuali, that's one way. There's another way to say this, but you got one of them. You could say Titlahtoa, Nahuatl Tlahtoli, so Castilla Tlahtoli, Titlahtoa Ica, Tisaniloa Ica, etc., etc. But there's another one too. One where you combine it all into one word. No one? All right, so Titlahtoa y Nahuatl noso, or so, or o, Castilla. And you could also say Tinahuatlahtoa. Do you speak Nahuatl? Noso ti Castilla Tlahtoa. This is adding Castilla and Nahuatl into the word Tlahtoa. And of course, you could also substitute Saniloa there. So Tinahuatlahtoa, noso ti Castilla Tlahtoa. This is more common, like the classical way to construct this, but this is still understood today. So this is not, they wouldn't be like, what? They don't understand 100% what you said. Okay, are you speaking or writing? Was it too hard? Okay, are you speaking? Let's start with that part. Are you speaking? Keniki mo
Tis-
Illia, are you speaking?
Tisaniloa.
Tisaniloa. And now how do you
Tisaniloa.
say? Uh-huh.
So.
So, uh-huh. And then how do you say, are you writing?
Oh, it's
Titlapoa
Tlapoa is to read.
or titlapoa? Oh, you're right. Yes. Sorry.
Tlapoa is to read. But you got the T part, right?
Tiquiloa.
Tlahquiloa.
Titlaquiloa.
Titlahtoa, so titlahquiloa. So the verb to write is ihquiloa. But ihquiloa is a transitive verb that requires an object. And if you don't know what you're writing, you can just put tla there. So it'd be tlahquiloa. The I disappears. I haven't given you a reason why, but this is when you see IH, that I generally disappears after the tla. So tlahtoa is really ihtoa. It's not tlahtoa. It's tlahtoa and tlahquiloa. It comes from the verb ihquiloa. Okay, so you could say titlahtoa or titlahquiloa. Notice too that in Nahuatl, titlahtoa means do you speak? But it also means like tlahtoa means to speak or speaking, ing, and tlahquiloa means write or writing, like you're doing it right now. Kind of like in Spanish when you say escribo, you could mean that you write in general, escribo, or you could mean that you're doing that right now, estoy escribiendo, but there's two forms, escribiendo and escribo, but escribo can mean that you're doing that right now. So now what can do that same thing with the verb tlahtoa, like I'm doing it, I speak, or in general, or I am doing it right now, I am speaking. Now what also does have the equivalent of estoy escribiendo. I haven't yet taught you that, but it's tica. So you could say tlahtotica. That means like you're doing it right now. Ni tlahtotica. However, it's not very common to use tlahtotica. It's actually more common to just say ni tlahtoa. That's why I haven't taught you that. But now what does have a tense to say I am doing that right now. Estoy escribiendo and estoy hablando. Ni tlahtotica, son ni tlahhuilotica. ¿Cuál? Okay, do I say it or do I tell him? Okay, so here you have to, this one may be pretty challenging, but think about what you're saying and who you're saying it to pick your verbs. So let's start with, do I say it? Just start with that part.
Ni Ihtoa.
Ihtoa requires an object. So when you say ni ihtoa, you're missing the object.
Nick. No, Nick.
Ihtoa.
Nikki. Okay.
Because the thing that you're saying is the it, right? I say it. Niki ihtoa. I say it.
Nikki Ihtoa. So ni Illia.
Okay.
Nikki
Illia.
Illia.
There you go. So Illia is also a transitive object. When you tell something to a person, you're telling it to a person. So you require an object. So nikilia, like you said. So ni tlahtoa, so niki ihtoa, so nikilia. So notice, even though this key is here, this key is referring to different things in each of these verbs. Nikitoa, I say it. The k is referring to the it. But when I say nikilia, I'm saying this k is referring to him. It's saying I tell him. That's what this key represents here, not an it. Okay. Kenihki moilia y Nahuatl, I say it, but you don't say it. I say it, but you don't say it. Notice my sentences are getting longer and longer. It's because I want you to get better and better at making sentences.
Nikito. Is it
Nikitoa.
Nikitoa? Ashti Ihtoa.
Yes, and you need the k there. Ihtoa, and then you're missing the but. The but.
Is that Ika?
Ika is with or about or regarding or during or more things. So it's not Ika. I mean, I only had like one slide on it. It's sampampa. Nikihtoa sampampa ashtikihtoa.
Or you can use pero.
You could use pero. I try not to, but yes, you can. Nikihtoa sampampa ashtikihtoa. I say it, but you don't say it. I tell you, but you don't tell me.
Nikili Sampampa Ash.
When you say nikili, you're saying I tell him or her. But here I'm saying I tell you.
Oh, Nimit Ili.
Nimitsili is the past tense, but you want to say it in the present tense. So nimitsili is I told you in the past, but you're trying to say it in the present.
Would it be Nimit Illia?
Nimitsilia, because Illia is the present tense. I know I haven't taught you the past, but nimitsili does mean something, but it means I told you. And you're here saying I tell you now. Nimitsilia, that's the first part, nimitsilia. And then we got to do the but.
Sampampa.
Sampampa, you don't tell me.
Ashti Nech Illia.
Kena. So now the whole phrase is Nimitsilia sampampa ashtinechilia. I tell you, but you don't tell me. I know it's a lot. That's why you gotta go step by step. Nimitsilia, ni, I, meets, to you, Illia, tell, Nimitsilia, I tell you, but sampampa, I should have color coded this. That would have been much better. But you don't tell me. Ash, don't. Di, you. Nech, to me. Tell. Ashtinechilia, you don't tell me. Nimitzilia sampamba ashtinechilia. I know, I'm sorry that these are harder. I think there's like two more questions and we'll be done. I help you, but you don't help me. So this is exactly the same as the previous one, except we have a different verb. Okay? I help you, but you don't help me.
Nikpalewia Sampampa Ash Tinech Palewia.
Nikpalewia is I help him. And you're trying to say I help you.
Oh, Nimit Palewia. Nimit Palewia Sampa Ash Tinech Palewia.
Kena. Ni it's long, right? Ni meets palewia,
Yeah.
sampampa ashtinech palewia. I know that verb palewia is long. Ni meets palewia, sampampa ashtinech palewia. I help you, but you don't help me. Quali? All right. Oh, that was my last question. Cool. So in summary, there are multiple ways to speak in Nahuatl, and I only really scratched the surface. Even though these words tlahtoa, saniloa exist, there are other words like there's also the word saniluia to speak with a person, kamawia to speak with a person, nonotza to have a conversation with a person, etc., etc. Nonotza to call out to a person. There's all kinds of words. And so I'm just giving you the basics, but trust me, there's many more, and some varieties use different ones. But tlahtoa and saniloa are common enough that they'll understand you pretty much if you use those. Okay, and in Nahuatl, it depends if you're saying something, you're going to use Ihtoa. If you're saying something to a person, you're telling them something, you would say Illia. Okay, Ika has multiple meanings. I only gave you the top ones, but Ika can mean with, during, regarding, about. This with does not mean with a person, so you do not say this ni tlahtoa ikata. If you say ni tlahtoa ikata, you're saying I speak about you. If I want to say I speak to you, it's a different verb that we didn't cover, but it would be ni mits sanilwia, I speak to you. Or you could say ni mits kamawia, I speak to you. Now we didn't cover sanilwia and sanilwia and kamawia, but just know in Nahuatl, sometimes some verbs, when you use them by themselves, you use them one verb, and when you use that verb to apply it to a person, you use a different verb. So that's something that applies overall in Nahuatl for a lot of verbs. And we will cover the applicative. That's like when you apply it to a person, the applicative in future classes. It's kind of an advanced topic. But in other words, Nahuatl differentiates between whether you do a thing or you do a thing with or to a person or for a person. Okay. Noso, so or o are or, and sampampa is but. Next week, we're going to talk about coming and going. So we're going to talk about the verb ya, to go, and wala, to come. We're also going to cover the prefixes on and wal, which also indicate motion. Any questions? I know this class was a little more heavy on the grammar. Tazokamati miak, imohuantin, and tlatlanilistli. I hope that this class was clear, and I hope it wasn't a jumbled mess.
Kemanik biase tlatlanilistli.
Uh-huh.
In the command form
Uh-huh.
of Ihtoa or Illia, so say for example, if you want to say, tell him or her your name, would that be Shikili Motoka?
Uh-huh. Shikili motoka. Tell him your name. Tell him or her your name. Shikili motoka. Uh-huh.
And is there any command forms for Ihtoa? Or
Yes.
is it more on the...
Yes, because you can say it, like as a command, say it. So then you would use ihtoa. So it would be chiquito.
Chiquito, got it.
Chiquito, say it. Versus shikili is tell him or tell her. Shinechili, tell me. Shikinili, tell them, etc. Shikinilikan, tell them. Shikilikan, tell him, etc., etc. Does yeyexin mean you are welcome? No, yeyexin means beautiful. So tiyeyexin means you are beautiful. That's how we say it in Huasteca Nahuatl, but other varieties say cuacualtzin. They both come from the word for good. In older Nahuatl, the word yectli, which is the root of yexin, it meant good or pure. So yeyexin means like something that's really good or pure. So that's why yeyexin means beautiful. The word quali, which I use to mean good, they believe that the word quali comes from the word to eat, which is qua. And so something that is quali is something that is edible or something that's good for you to eat. And so quali means like something that is good. And then from that word quali, you have the reduplication just like yectli, which is yeyexin. It's just a reduplication of yectli becoming yexin. And quali becomes cualtzin. And that also means beautiful in other varieties of Nahuatl. And they would understand cualtzin in Huasteca Nahuatl because it's also used, but not as common as yeyexin. I see papa used as because it is that right? I see papa used as because. Oh, it's not papa, it's pampa. Pampa. Pampa is because. In this word that I'm telling you for but, which is sampampa, it's a combination of the word san and pampa. And I don't know why that combination means but, and I honestly can't give you a reason why san pampa means but the word pampa, P-A-M-P-A, by itself is because. Pampa is because, but san pampa is but.
Earlier, you wrote about writing. I write with pencil. Can you say I write by hand? Or would you say by hand instead of with?
It's the same thing in Nahuatl, tica. Because when you're saying by hand, aren't you saying you're using your hand to write?
Okay. So it would be ika. I don't remember the name for hand, but
Might, but it's always possessed. So it'd be noma, my hand.
Okay.
In Nahuatl, body parts and relatives need to be possessed. So even though the word for hand is might, technically it's might, but you'll never see the word might by itself. That hand has to belong to somebody. So you would say noma, my hand, or toma, our hand, or tema. If you don't know whose hand it is, it would be tema, someone's hand. But it's got to belong to somebody, that hand. I guess if you saw a random hand that was cut off from a person, which is getting a little bit crazy, then I guess you would say might because it's separated. But generally, hands are not separated from people or the people who have them, or animals, I guess. I don't know if you call them hands. Okay. ¿Cuál? Oh, and Yayaxin does not mean you are welcome, but the way to say you are welcome in Nahuatl is, well, it depends which variety you speak. In our variety, you would say ashtle or ashtlen, ashtle or ashtlen. It means nothing. And this is it's a borrowed word from Spanish. Like, you know, when you say in Spanish, de nada, nada means nothing. Well, they just translated it from Spanish because Nahuatl doesn't have a word for you're welcome. So they just borrowed it and translated into Nahuatl and say ashtle. And in Guerrero, they say amitla. Amitla is basically the same thing as ashtlen, because in Guerrero, itla is like this itla is the same thing as saying the word nothing. Is coming from the word amo, and itla from tlamantli. So amitla is saying like nothing, not a thing, amitla. So in Guerrero, they may say amitla, which also means nothing in Guerrero Nahuatl. And other varieties may say ahtlen or ahtle to mean nothing. Yeah, that's all. Those are the ones I can think of right now. Or amotlen. Oh, amotlen is also nothing. Amotlen, ashtlen, ahtle, atlein. There's multiple ways to say that word. Amitla is the Guerrero word. Any other questions? Seyok tlatlaninistli. Amo. Ashkana.
Amo.
Okay. I hope this class wasn't too intense for you, because I think it can be. And if it was, just rewatch it. And I already have the homework for this one, although I didn't incorporate some of the stuff, but I have at least a 2-page worth of homework for this one already made from the past that I had created in the past. I just need to replace some of the words that you probably don't know yet, or maybe I'll just keep it the way it is so that you learn new words. Maybe I should. And I didn't incorporate tlahtoa and sanilua, but I guess I don't need to. It's not that hard. So I pretty much have this one done, and trust me, you'll get a lot of practice with this homework, because I really emphasize the difference between telling somebody and saying something. It's very important. Okay. Tlastokamatimiak, nomomashtikawat, timoitase chikueyiyok. Thank you all, my students, and we will see each other in 1 week.
Tlasokamati temastike.
Timoitase is like we'll see each other. Hasta luego.